Okay, hello everyone, and thank you for coming to my workshop podcast for research communication strategies and tools for a successful podcast. So let me introduce the session. I am Lisa Hooper. I'm head of media services at Howard Tilton Memorial Library at Tulane University Libraries. And in that role of head of media services, I have a lot of different functions, but all of them serve to fulfill my department's mission, which is to foster equitable opportunities for interdisciplinary discovery, innovative scholarship, and skill development through creative play with multimedia collections and media tools. All right, I've also had an opportunity to work on a couple different podcasts. The very first one is 2 summers ago called Literacies, a 4-part audio series. That one only lives on Tulane University Library's YouTube channel. It's the only place you can find it. And then the second one I did just this past summer with my colleague, Catherine Hicks. And that one is called Senior Research, the podcast. We put it up on Spotify and on YouTube as well, both on Tulane University accounts. So that is me, that is what I do, and let's get to our agenda. So we're going to start by recognizing that podcasting is a frame of mind. And in that concept, we're going to talk about strategies for design. Then we're going to slide into project management and strategies for planning, and we'll close out with a quick review of some tools and resources that are available. All right, so podcasting, it really is a frame of mind, right? And so Glenn Weldon wrote NPR's podcast startup guide a couple years ago. We have it in our library. You could get it in print or online, but just as a reminder from Weldon, podcasts are an on-demand, on-the-go medium ideally suited for the speed of now, allowing us to absorb information, insight, and or diversion through our ears while we do other things. Right? And so it's obvious for most of us, at least, that podcasts are primarily audio, but I still want to emphasize what Weldon is saying here. It's really important especially for podcast creators. What he is saying is that as creators, we need to find a way to connect with audiences quickly in a way that's going to hold their attention and in a way that is going to allow audiences to do more than one thing without losing track of the other, right? Okay. With that in the back of your mind, let's think about goal setting. And the very first question you can ask yourself at the top of your project is, why are you thinking about a podcast instead of a traditional article, book, or conference paper? And I suspect for many of us, the reason is going to do with the audience and our goals, right? So I recommend starting at least by setting audience-centered goals. And of course, to do that, the first question you need to answer is, who is my audience? Are they other academics who are already familiar with the topic and are really comfortable listening to people speak in the jargon? Are they people just learning about the topic and maybe they're not so familiar with it? Or are they people who maybe demographically, from what you've learned about the demographics, they might not have a higher education degree. Maybe they have a high school degree or lower, right? So thinking about who your audience is, what the statistical demographics are, the culture of that audience, it's important to know, right? This is where you really dig into your goals and you ask, what do I want my audience to gain or do after listening to my podcast, right? It's a pretty obvious question, but it's really important. I am a really big fan with podcasts of maybe just setting one goal. I often find that a single goal for a podcast is just enough. Some of us are able to handle multiple goals and hold those goals throughout. If that's you, go for it, but don't get carried away, right? And then you've answered those first two questions, and it's really good, once more, to ask yourself, is a podcast the best way to reach my audience and achieve my goals, right? It's a really important question to sit with for a minute before you get too far down the road. Okay, and so as you are designing your podcast, you need to find your voice. And when I say find your voice, I mean figure out what your pacing is, the emotion, your word choice, all of that plays a role in connecting with your audience, right? And so when you find your voice, you are also going to find the voice for your audience. And I want to listen to just a couple examples. Partners for Advancing Health Equity. It's a podcast produced by Tulane. I'm going to jump to about 240. Let's give it a listen for about a minute or so.
Long-term investment and overcoming threats and collective action. To kick off today's episode, here's a thought-provoking quote from Brett Ford, Associate Professor of Psychology at the University of Toronto and a leader in this space.
There's so many missed opportunities for thriving and for growth that can happen, right? Life isn't just about avoiding depression, anxiety, and loneliness. It's also about, opportunities to connect and to feel well, to feel wellness, not just a lack of illness.
This quote reminds us that true wellness involves actively seeking connections and growth, rather than merely avoiding negative emotions that can bring us down. In other words, endurance is fostered by supportive networks, cross-sector collaboration, ongoing learning, and a shared vision for systemic change. We begin this retrospective where endurance often starts.
Okay, I'm going to pause that one there. So this is obviously an example of a podcast that carries the gravitas of its subject, right? Mental health in health equity work, which is very important, right? So it's got a lot of weight to it. You can hear it's a little bit slower. You can also hear that they are saying the same thing multiple times, but each time they expand on it or explain it in a slightly different way. And that might be a little bit frustrating for some audiences, but it could also be very helpful for other audiences. Again, it really comes down to understanding who your audience is. Now I want to play a clip from another one. Also seems to carry a little bit of seriousness with it. This is the very first episode, and I'm going to jump to minute marker 202. Let's give it a listen.
Hello, everyone. This is Gabby LaPera. I'm here with Dr. Bernard Wood at his office in George Washington University in the, how do you say the name of your program, sir?
This is the Center for the Advanced Study of Human Paleobiology, which is a pretty pretentious title, but I was attracted by the acronym CASH, and then with the P at the end of it.
I am here to talk to you today about a paper that you gave me and that you completed fairly recently. The Principles and Practice of Human Evolution Research. Are we asking questions that can be answered? I think before we dive into that, I would love it if you could give listeners just a little bit of a background into what you do.
Okay, I'm going to leave that one there. So here's another one. It's very clearly an academic subject presented to me in a fairly academic staging kind of way. All right, let me go back to our slides and bring us to something really quite different, right? Maybe some of you are already familiar with ologies. It's an example of a very fun podcast while also talking very intelligently about real science. And I'm going to jump to about 33:47. We'll start here.
Snakes, not sneaky. Cool.
You heard it here first.
Late Night Pie wants to know, what allows amphibians to live in a hybrid environment of water/land? Do they breathe air or water? And also, if you had to kiss a frog, what kind would you pick?
Yeah, that covers a lot of territory there.
It really does.
So amphibians are a really diverse group, but the classic example is the frog that lives on land. It goes in water, lays its eggs, then it's a tadpole, then it turns into a frog. And that's the classic amphibian life cycle, but there's a lot of exceptions. There's a lot of salamanders that never leave the water. Some frogs lay their eggs on leaves and they drop into the water. So lots of different strategies. Many have gills, and that helps them breathe in the water. They also have semi-permeable skin, which helps them do some respiration through that. And others have lungs, and some have both over the course of their life.
So it varies.
Yes.
Axolotls have cool-ass gills, though. They just hang on to them. They look like
Yes.
They look like Vegas showgirl fans, a little bit.
Yeah, now that you mention it, that's true.
So an axolotl is a kind of salamander. It lives exclusively in a few lakes in Mexico, and it retains these baby characteristics, like these external gills, which look so much like one of Cher's fantastic feather fan headdresses from the 80s. I would also like to apologize to Slovenian cave olms, which are different than axolotls, but they still have baby gills, and they look like they're long-lost siblings.
So they're one of the unique examples that they never really grow up. The technical term is paedomorph, and they retain their juvenile characteristics, in this case, an aquatic lifestyle on gills for their whole life.
Is that also called neoteny? Or is that something else? Is that only in breeding?
Yeah, let's see. The paedomorph.
Okay. I had to pause that one there because I could listen to that all day. We're gonna ask you to think about, in those three examples that we just heard, I really want you to think about what you heard and how that impacted your engagement with it. So things about pacing, like definitely the third one, ologies. The host was speaking much faster than in the previous two. How did they handle word choice? How did they approach jargon? Yes, they didn't shy away from it in ologies, did they? But they also managed to explain it very quickly. Was the tone appropriate to the topic and the imagined audience? Did you find your mind wandering? We only listened to maybe 2 minutes, I think, of all of those. But 2 minutes is plenty of time for us to think about other things. So did you find yourself wandering off, and were you able to bring yourself back? Questions like that. And did you retain anything from what you heard? Right? I know for me, I was much easier able to pay attention to ologies. There's a lot of science that I didn't understand. It was new to me. I felt like I learned something. I was engaged. I appreciated the pacing, and it held my attention, so my mind didn't wander. And some of the other ones with a slower pace, my mind was off almost immediately. And it was sometimes difficult. Some of those I've actually listened to multiple times in their entirety, and I'm not too sure if I really got as much out of it, right? And what I want to do now is go back and have you guys listen to just the beginning of 20,000 Hertz. This one handles their podcast in a somewhat different way. We're just going to listen to the first few minutes, I think.
You're listening to 20,000 Hertz.
The stories
Behind the world's
most iconic
and fascinating sounds.
I'm Dallas Taylor. As an 80s kid who watched a lot of television, there are certain TV theme songs that instantly take me back to childhood. Stuff like Fraggle Rock.
Dance your cares away. Worries for another day. Let the music
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And the Wonder Years.
What would you do if I sang out of tune?
Then there's Reading Rainbow. As a little kid, that song felt magical, and it still does, which is why I was so excited when, out of the blue, I got an email saying, "Hey Dallas, I'm the original composer behind the Reading Rainbow theme, and I'd love to come on 20,000 Hertz and talk about it." Yes, please.
Hey, I'm Steve Horlick.
Okay. So I'm hoping you heard the difference in this one. It's, to me, very blatantly obvious. I didn't understand what 20,000 Hertz was until they said their clip, or their hook, which we're about to talk about. And they managed to get through their entire introduction that introduced the podcast series as a whole in 13 seconds. And it was everything I needed to know, and just there sort of set my expectations. And then between second 14 and minute 107, they managed to introduce all of episode 1, right? So they used a very compressed timeline, but gave me a lot of information in barely over a minute. And I'm frankly quite hooked. The other thing I wanted to point out is how they set their character, or really set their voice for this, right? Which is what we're talking about. They're talking about sound technology, and so of course it is sound rich. It helps that I am also interested in sounds as a thing, and I tend to be really My attention is really grabbed by different sounds more than people talking, honestly. So that was helpful. And what they also did is they used a lot of different sound clips to help demonstrate what they were saying, right? They didn't just list the films or the TV shows. They actually played musical pieces from those shows. And that helps tell everybody what it's about. It helps engage people, and it also helps audiences and listeners get sort of a mental image. I also think because this is a podcast about the technology of sound, by really, really embracing sound technology in their introduction, they really sort of spoke to the passion of their audience, of other people who are interested in the technology of sound. So I think it's a wonderful way to create sort of a rich soundscape. It does take a lot of time, but it's honestly not that hard. So I really enjoy this one for multiple reasons, notwithstanding how succinct and to the point they are, while still deeply informative. Okay, so we are still talking about designing your podcast. And when you're designing your podcast, it might be helpful to know that there are indeed genres, even within the podcast world. And of course, genre is just another way that you can connect with your audience. It would be helpful, I think, to know that there are roughly 4 genres, but there's lots and lots of room for variation within those 4 genres. So the one that we hear the most, and that probably I anticipate will come up the most with academic research and when you're communicating that research, is an interview. We heard example of ologies, and what I really love about ologies is that clearly the host is deeply knowledgeable. They are as knowledgeable as their guest, right? And I think you can also notice that in our podcast, Senior Research. Catherine, our host, is deeply knowledgeable about all things scenes, as were a lot of our guests. So they had really wonderful conversations and discussions, not just short question, long answer, right? They're sort of more of an interview conversation. We heard it with 20,000 Hertz at the beginning, and if you're not familiar with the locally produced Sea Change, I highly recommend it. They do a beautiful job. Another genre is the panel or roundtable. I have to admit, I am personally not a fan of this format just because there tends to be a lot of talk over, and I just get frustrated with that. It does work really well for some people, and it could also work really well for communicating your research. So again, because it's not my cup of tea, I sort of struggled to find a good example, but I can imagine a really good research topic that would do really well in a panel or roundtable is someone doing a podcast about multiplayer games and gaming. That would probably do really well, right? Another genre is the narrative. If y'all are familiar with This American Life, it's a narrative, very clearly a narrative. Performance, you could probably think of NPR Tiny Desk. If you do want to do performance, though, you do need to pay attention and get maybe think about licensing and broadcasting rights. It's a whole world. I would recommend you talk to a lawyer of some sort who might be able to advise you on licensing on that one if you go that route. All right. So at this point, we've sort of talked a lot about designing your podcast, but now it's really time to sort of put your idea onto paper, right? And this is where you can start thinking about your proposal. Some people might call it a prospectus, right? And so this document can serve many purposes depending on your purpose and the people reading it, right? So on the one hand, it can be a pitch document that you might give to administrators, or if you need people to fund it, you can give it to funders so they understand what they're funding or approving in the case of administrators. You could also use it as an information sheet, and you could use that when you're inviting people to collaborate with you or inviting people to your project team, or maybe you have special guests that you want to invite to interview or be on it on individual episodes. You could give it to them. So again, they understand what it is you're doing, what the podcast is about, and what their expectations are. And then for you, I imagine you would be the project lead. This document can really become your guidepost for the rest of your work on the podcast, right? So let's take a closer look at what is actually in a prospectus or a proposal. There's very obviously a title. It should be short, catchy, informative. A hook is also very short, like 1 to 2 sentences that tell curious listeners what it's about and what to expect. It's well documented, and Weldon mentioned it again in his book that I always have nearby, the NPR's Podcast Startup Guide. I think it was in here where I read the average listener, podcast seeker, listens to about 20 seconds before they decide whether they want to listen to something or not. So Again, make it short, make it interesting, and let people know what to expect, right? As a creator, and the person driving the podcast, you can also think of your hook as a mission statement, something that you can return to time and time again to help you and your team stay on topic and avoid topic creep, because that is shockingly easy to fall into that topic creep trap, right? Obviously, you're going to have an abstract. This is meaningful, concise expansion of your hook. It's really important for y'all to know, though, that different hosting platforms might have different word count limits for your abstract, so you might need to be prepared to shorten it when you're ready to put it up. You can also identify how many episodes you plan to have per season. That will also be important for your project planning and scheduling, right? You also want to identify your project principles and their roles, and we're going to talk about that next, I believe, in just a moment. If you have any planned guests, this is the time to make your dream list of guests. It might have to change over time as, reality and scheduling limitations strike, but you can dream, right? Your audience, in like 2 sentences tops. Describe your target audience and what you want them to do after listening to your podcast, right? If you are part of a larger organization, then it might also be helpful to point out the alignments with your organization's strategic plan, right? And then again, if you need funding, this is the place to list your funding needs, right? Also, you're going to want a dissemination plan, and I personally really like to see an episode outline with brief descriptions. This is the project proposal that we used for our administrators here at Tulane when we wanted to do Senior Research, the podcast series. Obviously, you've got our title, our abstract, which turned out to be a little bit too long for our hosting platform. We had to shorten it. Our number of episodes, we originally planned on 6. And we listed our project principles. And one of the reasons why I wanted to show you this is because you can see I was a little bit naive. I only listed myself and Catherine, but we also had more people helping us. We had Anthony Del Rosario, who is one of our colleagues here in the library. He did the graphic design for us. And then to help with marketing and helping us get this out into the world and creating awareness, we also leaned on the library's marketing team, Rawad Nahas and Becky Gibson, and they were really, really helpful. Nobody would know about it if it weren't for them, right? So you should really think closely about everybody on your project principles and your team. I also wanted to show this document to you because you can see that we were taking on multiple roles. I'm going to show you a list of all the potential roles y'all might have in your team. Catherine and I each took on about 2 roles. I took on production and audio engineer. Catherine took on designer and host, and I'm going to talk about those in a moment. You can also see that we had our dream list of project guests, and, reality life things happened, so we had to change that. And then you can also see our not very well threshed out dissemination plan. I think in an initial proposal, depending on your needs, this might be enough. In other cases, you might need to have a really thorough dissemination plan. And then you could see our episode outline. For each episode, we figured out the order we wanted them to be in, gave them a title, and a very, very brief description. And these were really helpful when we invited our guests to participate. This is what we really showed them: that the title, abstract, and the episode we wanted them to speak to. You can also see from all the strikeouts that it changed. It was a working document, right? Okay, so this is going to take us into the next section of this workshop, which is project management. And we're going to start by talking about your project principles. So your principles, essentially your team that you're going to be working with throughout this project, right? So it's going to be really important to find team members with key skill sets and knowledge expertise. That can really go a long way to making this a fun experience. But I also want to point out that it is totally possible to be a team of 1 or 2. You just might be wearing all of those roles and all those hats that we're going to talk about. And so I also want to point out that with the examples we listened to, they were clearly made by academics. Well, most of them, yeah, were made by academics. Some of them are really highly polished. You could tell they've been doing this for a minute, and they've really got all the skills and tools under their belt. But then there are plenty of other podcasts out in the podcast world where it's very, very obvious they were produced by academics who were learning as they went. And in my personal opinion, that is okay. They might not quite reach the audience level that Ologies did, but they are still really valuable. They still have an audience. And the more you do it, the better each episode is going to get. And so, by example, I think anthrobiology, I strongly suspect, is exactly one of those, an academic who learned it as they went. You can definitely hear, if you listen to the first episode, which I think was 2020, maybe 2022, and the most current episode, which was published last month in January, there's a huge difference in the quality and the comfort level that you hear coming through the mics, right? And so you could tell they've been improving and it's much more comfortable. I think other examples of people that probably, well, I have got an example of one where clearly I know the host did a lot of research and preparation, but this is still their first one and they are still learning as they go. I actually think it's really wonderful. This one is called the Champion Standard. It's produced by a Tulane student athlete and it is for other student athletes. It's very informative, really well done. But again, you can tell there's well prepared, but also still learning as he works. And each episode is better and better, right? Another one that is very clearly produced by academic faculty, and that's okay. It's called The Power Shift, Decolonizing Development. It's still an incredibly valuable podcast that I recommend to people, but you can tell they're still working it out. And I want to give these to you as examples, as it's still possible to have a quality podcast, but also be a little bit transparent that this is not your main job. That's okay, I think is what I'm trying to say, right? Okay, so let's talk about these principles and your team, right? There is, it looks like a big team. It could be a big team, or it might be a team of just one, and maybe you're it. If that's the case, then these are all the hats that you might find yourself wearing along the way, right? So let's start with the host. This is the voice of the podcast, the person who is going to be on the mic guiding each discussion for every episode, unless you have a guest host. Designer. The designer is the person who helps you find your voice. They help you find your style, maybe your genre, and they might also help you organize the episodes into a logical progression, right? You also have the producer, aka the taskmaster. This is the person who helps set a work schedule. They will be the one to scout and reserve recording locations, schedule meetings. They're going to be the main communicator between everybody on the team, especially if you have a big team. And they generally hold everybody accountable to be sure stuff gets done. Right? You're also going to have an audio engineer. That is the person who captures the recording and then turns it into something that people actually want to listen to. And then hopefully you also have a communications or marketing person. And again, this is the person who's going to help get your podcast out into the world and let people know it exists and get them engaging with it. If you're really lucky, maybe they will also create and manage your podcast's very own social media account so you can continue engaging with audiences in between episodes, right? You will also need perhaps a graphic designer. You're going to need at least one good image to represent your podcast on your hosting platform. And there are some podcasts, like 20,000 Hertz is an example, where they have a primary podcast logo image, and then every episode has a unique logo. That feels like a lot to me, but if that really floats your boat, then do it. And if you have the resources to do it, do it. And then finally, yes, a web designer. I strongly recommend always having a website to accompany your podcast. And there are multiple reasons, but you could think of a website will be a place to put photos, videos, transcript, both in HTML, so that web crawlers find them and they become more discoverable, but also accessible PDFs. And then you can also add supplementary resources, like links to any readings or other resources that you might mention in your podcast, right? Okay, let's see what comes next, right? So this is where you really need to get it done. And again, this is where your producer is going to shine and they are going to become the best project manager you have ever met. Maybe that's going to be you. This is really a thing. Podcasting is a thing where organization and having built-in accountability checkpoints are going to be really key to getting it done and getting it done well. And in the world of organization and accountability checkpoints, you might want to look into different scheduling tools. There are a lot of tools designed specifically for producing a podcast. And some elements that you might want that some people recommend for podcasting is a scheduling tool that allows you to set weekly and monthly production goals, allows you to create daily to-do or action item lists. Some platforms can also help identify obstacles to success. Honestly, the only one I can think of within the world of a scheduling tool is like nobody is available to meet that week. That's a big problem. Set daily, weekly, and monthly deadlines. Deadlines are so key, and you can't really fudge on them either. Having that task and deadline reminder is also critical for so many of us. I have mixed feelings about status trackers. Some people really, really love them. I find them deeply depressing and stressful. I think the only kind of status tracker I like is like a checklist where I can like cross it off the list and I can see that visual slashed through the item. That feels like I've actually accomplished something. But that's me personally. You might have your own preferred status tracker system. Also really important is something that allows you to link all the related files together. So all of your files for episode 1 are in a spot, all your files for episode 2 are in a spot, and so on. That will your audio engineer will absolutely love you for that later. Or you'll love yourself for that later. Future you will thank past you. Some people really value timeline visualizations. If you are a visual person, if that helps you stay on task, that would be something to look for in your scheduling tool. But what I think is more important than anything else when you're selecting your scheduling tool is finding something that matches both your technology comfort zone as well as your capacity to learn it so you can use it well, right? There are a lot of really fabulous tools out there, and maybe they're pretty easy to adopt, but there's still a bit of a learning curve. If you do not have time, even for the smallest learning curve, then that is not the tool for you. It's going to distract, is how I see it. And so maybe being prepared to fall back to the most basic shared Google Doc, right? And maybe a shared spreadsheet for your timeline. I use Excel for my timelines, project timelines all the time, and they work well for me. But for those who want to see what else is out there, a little bit more automated, maybe require a little spin up, and if you don't mind it being a commercial platform, on your screen should be a couple options for you that often come up in reviews. They are actually really quite robust. Some are easier to learn than others. I believe all of these are free at a certain level, and then if you want to really dig into it, you're going to have a subscription. In addition to these three, I have also used the free version of Trello, and I've had mixed results. Sometimes it works really well, other times not so well. Honestly, I think for me, it's more about personal accountability and holding myself to it. Similarly, Tulane is a Microsoft shop, so I've also tried using Teams Planner, but that one is with even more mixed success. But essentially what you need to do is just find the planner that works best for you and for your team. So again, if a shared Google Doc and Google Calendar works, use it, right? There's no need to get too fancy on this one. Okay, other things that you need to do and be thinking about is just actually getting ready to record, right? So you're going to need to scout, select, and reserve a recording location if that's relevant. Maybe you're going to be in your office and that's great. Just be sure you put a sign on your door saying, hey, recording, do not disturb. That's part of getting ready, right? Schedule a session with everyone who needs to be there. That means like putting it on your calendar and being sure it's on everybody else's calendar. It's going to be really important if y'all are in different time zones that you be sure everybody understands what time it is for their time zone. I've had too many meeting mess ups because of that. So you're going to need to send that to, obviously, to your host, to any guests that you might have. You're going to send it to your audio engineer. And if you have a marketing and communication person, maybe invite them so they can take some photographs that can be used later in social media or on your website. If you don't have somebody to do that or they're not available in that case, then just use your cell phone, your smartphone, and take a couple snaps that you can use later on. Those can come out in handy later. You also need to make sure that your host and your guest are ready and they're on the same page. And to do that, you might actually want to create a pre-recording session meeting where y'all can, especially your host and your guest, can talk, get on the same page, maybe collaboratively select a couple talking points that y'all want to hit in your conversation. If your guest is in a different locale and not recording in the same room as you, you might want to ask them if they need advice for choosing a suitable location and recording equipment. If they're going to use their computer, they're going to use their computer. That'll be fine. There are plenty of examples out there in the world where it works very well. You also, getting prepared to record is prep your gear and know how to use your gear and making sure your batteries are charged. That's really important for everybody. And if a script is important, be sure you have your script and your talking points in order. You might not be scripted for the entire conversation, but if you're going to sort of do some stage setting at the beginning of your episode, that can easily be scripted. So really familiarize yourself with it. You can read your script several times. I recommend reading it out loud. Maybe read it to other people so you sort of feel like you're engaging and you're really comfortable with it. Okay, so let's briefly, I feel like I'm jumping to topics, but we're going to keep on jumping. Let's talk about these hosting platforms, right? This is all part of getting ready and part of your planning process. So hosting platforms should do all of these things. They should have a transparent pricing. Most of them do nowadays. You might have to dig, but like what is included in the different pricing levels? When I'm looking at a hosting platform, my big question is it free? And how long will they host it? Some free places, free hosting platforms will only host episodes for like a limited amount of time before they take it down. So really pay attention to stuff like that. Do they have distribution directories? So will they automatically push it out to other platforms themselves? Or if not, will they give you advice for setting up an RSS feed? Does the hosting platform also offer website hosting? Or will they have an integration with other website platforms, hosting platforms? Similarly, you want to think about social media. How well do they integrate? At this point in time, integration is pretty seamless between all of the major podcast platforms and social media platforms. Some platforms will also have audio transcription services. Those are really good. I do strongly recommend with any transcription service, though, that you read privacy and their data policies. So essentially, when you upload your audio, you're giving them your audio file. What do they do with that after they finish the transcription? Do they delete the file permanently? Do they hold on to it? Do they sell it to third parties? These are things that you want to look into, right? And then also back to hosting platforms, what analytics do they offer? And that can be in terms of how many people have listened to each episode, how long have they listened to episodes, where are they listening from, and then what support and help services are built into the platform. And then finally, of course, like, are their policies transparent? That's going to be really important. So on this next slide and the link that's on there, again, borrowed from NPR and just sort of adapted a little bit. There is a podcast hosting service checklist that you can try out for yourself if that's the level of organization that you like. And then finally, really don't be shy about telling people about your podcast. The more people you talk to, the more people are going to listen to it, right? So really lean into social media, not only to tell people that your podcast exists, like that's important, but also use it to actively engage with your listeners. That might encourage them to come back and listen to the next episode and feel part of a community, right? You can also add your podcast image and a link to your email signature. That's something I keep reminding myself to do, but I haven't done yet. I do recommend it though. I love seeing it in other people's emails. Speaking of email people, even email people that you haven't spoken to in a little while, maybe a long while, just to let them know that, hey, you produced a podcast, you're really proud of it. Maybe give it a listen and share it if they like it, right? It's totally okay to do that. And definitely take advantage of that random right moment to let folks know that there is a podcast on this topic that just happened to naturally come up in conversation. It's surprising how often that happens. And then you can also have fun with swag, like create buttons or stickers or bookmarks, etc., or something like that you can just put out in the world and let people grab and have something to take with them, a little more tangible. And then if you really want to, you could also host a launch party. Okay, finally. Tools and resources. And so at this point, we're going to talk mostly about some resources that are available through Tulane folks, but there are also some that are available just in the broader world. So, all right, hardware and software, media services, my department here at Howard Tilton Memorial Library at Tulane. We have a small but pretty useful, I think, collection of recording equipment that's available to all Tulane students, staff, and faculty. I'm going to show you quickly how to get there, and I'm going to do that. I'm going to click onto our website, our webpage. So if you go to the library's main website, you're going to go to Places and find us under Media Services. And once you're on our page, you are going to click on Borrow Creative Technology. All right, so that will take us here. This is where you can find out how to get the equipment, how long you can have it, what happens when you return it late, or especially not at all. I know nobody would never return something. It always comes back, right? And then for this conversation, y'all are going to want to know about the microphones that we have available. My team member, Josh Wyndham, and our colleague, Alan Velasquez, collaborated on a really lovely tutorial, recording tools, techniques, and applications, where they really step you through each microphone that we had at the time, how to set it up, and good uses for each. I really recommend it. They did a beautiful job. And then as you continue to scroll down, you can see all the different microphones that we have available for people to check out with their splash card. The senior research I recorded on the Blue Yeti USB mic. It's literally all you have to do is plug it into your computer and it powers on, and you can start recording with your software that we'll talk about in a minute. So let's say you actually want the Yeti. All you have to do is check availability. That will pop you into our catalog so you can see how many are available. And in this case, there are, as you can see, some people do not return them on time, but we still have 2 available for you. So you could say, hey, this item is in place. You could come right into Media Services and check it out on the spot, right? The other thing I want to point out, oh, I know where it is. Let me go back to our list of equipment. On this page, the Creative Technology landing page, if you scroll down to related campus resources, you'll find a few additional things that might be helpful. I'm about to talk about these real quick. But then Spaces, Academic Learning and Tutoring Center, is located in the basement of the library. They have a mini studio. Was it last summer or maybe 2 summers ago? We collaborated with them. They had the room, we had the equipment, so we put them all together finally, and they have a really wonderful space for recording. It's very quiet. You could get a beautiful sounding recording in that room. The room is small. You can comfortably fit 2 people, 3 people work. You could fit 4 if you have to. I feel crowded with 4, but if you really, really have to, you could fit 5 people in. After that, I would just find a different spot to record, which is totally doable, right? Okay, so speaking of software, if you dig into, resources and learning resources for podcasting, you might hear people talking about DAWs, a DAW, that is short for Digital Audio Workstation, which is extremely fancy for audio editing software. I'm probably simplifying a little bit, but that's essentially what it is, right? So I use Audacity. It is free and open source. It's extremely easy to use, and it's compatible with all computer operating systems, which is why I like it. GarageBand is also free for people who have Macs. It only works with a Mac machine. I've been told it's easy to learn, but I don't have a Mac, so I'll leave that to Mac owners to tell you about. We also at Tulane have access to Adobe Express. I only learned late last week that Adobe Express apparently has a podcasting creating tool built into it. I haven't run into it by accident, but I've also never intentionally looked for it. I did briefly look into Adobe Express for podcasting this morning, and I did find some audio editing tools that looked interesting, but I don't know how well it really works as an editing platform. I have questions about it. Speaking of Adobe and being an Adobe Creative Campus, because we're a creative campus, we also have Adobe Audition. For me, that is for the really, really ambitious audio editors. It is like professional, in my mind, a professional editing tool. I have not learned it thoroughly yet, so I'm not prepared to give workshops, but I do workshops on Audacity. We'll get to those in a jiff. Anyways, websites. I did mention that you're going to need somebody to build out a website. They are not as hard as you might think. Here at Tulane, we provide access to story maps. It's essentially a website platform provided by ArcGIS. We support story maps and ArcGIS here at the libraries. At the libraries, we also have a platform called Digital Exhibits. Any Tulane affiliate can request a digital exhibit space. It runs on WordPress, and it's already got some basic design elements plugged in for you, right? Again, Adobe Express also has website design. It's extremely easy to learn. You have access to so much stock imagery, video and audio as well. So you can actually make a really, really beautiful looking website very easily. My biggest issue with Adobe Express is it's incredibly proprietary. So if you leave Tulane, you can't access it anymore. And you also cannot easily transfer your Adobe Express website onto a different web hosting platform. So if you leave and you want to bring that website with you, you essentially have to rebuild it from scratch. That is my biggest hesitation with Adobe Express, but it is a really great place to learn, if nothing else. And then, of course, Canva also allows people to create websites. It's also pretty easy. It is a commercial platform. They do have a free version that is somewhat limited, and if you want to get the subscription, then you have more access to more stock content and design elements. Okay, so skills training. Obviously, people have been podcasting for a long time. You do not need to reinvent the wheel, and there are lots and lots and lots of resources out there. So for when you're ready to learn, and build up some new skills, you can do a couple things. You can request a tech consultation with yours truly. There's my email address. Or you could just find it on YouTube, which, it's the place we all go to learn stuff they didn't teach us in school, right? And more. I learned a lot from YouTube, honestly. So those are a couple places for technology. I also have a couple workshops still on the calendar. This workshop is the February 4th workshop. And then specific to audio, my next one is March 4th, Audio Editing for Beginners, a hands-on tour of Audacity. If there's a workshop that you would like and you don't see it on this list, send me a line and we can either turn it into a technology consultation or we can dream up a workshop together. That could be sort of fun, right? And so I think that is it. It is time for ideas or profound questions or even straightforward questions of content I may have left out. And we'll stop the recording here. Thank you for everybody who is watching.